What does it take to turn a side hustle into a full-time passion in the world of short-term rentals?
And then very quickly I was like, it reached a point I quit this summer, where I was like, I I'm mentally elsewhere. I need to just go all in on the Airbnb thing, and it feels like that was years ago at this point.
Today's guest is Jarrett Chouinard, who started in short-term rentals with a single arbitrage unit in Connecticut and has turned that into a multi-property business.
Like I said, most of my experiences have been pretty good. I've learned some lessons, like some of these buildings, because it's arbitrage, I couldn't install keypad locks onto some of the doors, which means you have to use the old school key method.
Hear how he decides to say no to some potential clients and why that's a game changer for his growth.
If you say no to something that doesn't work for you, eventually, something that does work for you will come your way. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, these clients, you will have to interact with them a lot. So the number one requirement for me is just someone that I think is, respects my opinion and is easy to work with.
My name is Jason Muth. I am a 30-time Airbnb superhost. I've worked in the media business for over 25 years, and in 2016, I started building my Chapter 2 with short-term rentals. Since then, we've welcomed over 5,000 guests and their furry friends to all of our properties. And we are here to show you how to create a smart stay. Now, here's the show. All right, Jarrett, welcome to Smart Stay Show. We're really excited to have you as part of the show.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
We just learned this is your first podcast recording.
It is. Yeah.
Wow. Well,
Nope.
so I'm glad to. Yeah, we'll be very nice to you. I'm so glad that I reached out to you to invite you on the show. Just so listeners know, like, the relationship that we have with Jarrett. This is Jarrett Chouinard. He runs Stellar Retreats, and he is in Brooklyn, New York, and his properties that he co-hosts are. You could talk about that, but they're the kind of, within drivable markets to New York City, like upstate New York, Connecticut, around. Jarrett is in the same mastermind group that we're in, Short-Term Rental Secrets, and a partner of yours with a meetup that you're doing. Andrew Rodriguez has been a past guest of Smart Stay Show. We loved recording with Andrew, and we had to get the other side of the coin. So right? So, and here you are. So welcome.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me.
All right. So Jarrett, first, before we get into like some nuts and bolts about what it's like to be running this business and dealing with all of these short-term rental guests, tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to launching Stellar Retreats.
Yeah, so I've been a host for 3 years now. I actually worked in media as well, media and advertising, and wanted to get into real estate on the side. And then it quickly became, time consuming and also like a bigger, passion of mine. Started with an arbitrage property in Connecticut, which is where I'm from, and then started using PTO to start building out more arbitrage properties. And then after joining the mastermind, was kind of pushed into co-hosting, so kind of pivoting the business model, and have been doing that for about a year now.
That's interesting. Rory, I don't think we've had too many arbitrage experts or people that have been doing short-term rental arbitrage on this podcast.
It's been a while since we've spoken to somebody who's done that. When we see that in different contexts, particularly in urban contexts where they rent an apartment and arbitrage it from there. So this sounds a little bit different.
Yeah, happy to go into it if you wanted to.
Yeah, I've not been a fan of that model, just because we've purchased our properties before we decided to actually co-host other people's properties, and I was more of a fan of owning the real estate than renting it. But there must be money that can be made there if you find the right situation.
Yeah, for me, living in New York City, rent is expensive, and this was kind of a way. I did in New Haven, Connecticut, so from Connecticut originally, and this was kind of the easiest way to get into real estate, so not too much money invested. Started with one apartment, and then quickly kind of expanded into, and I got 4 more. And I'm glad I kind of stopped expanding into that market. Just the margins are just a little too small, and there the biggest con of arbitrage is there is a risk that the landlord could sell the building. Um, you are a little exposed, and you don't you're not getting any appreciation from those assets. And yeah, if they sell the building, then you're stuck with all this furniture that only you can, coordinate that to fit into another house, but usually it fits kind of perfectly into the house you designed it for.
Yeah. And we should say, if you're listening to this and don't understand Airbnb arbitrage, you're the tenant, right? Somebody owns real estate. You have a lease with this tenant for a certain period of time, and the owner, they know what you're doing. They know that you're short-term renting it out, correct?
Yep. Yeah. So uh, you rent an apartment and you have to get approval from the landlord to sublease the apartment. And really what it was just getting an addendum added to the lease that says that I can sublet, this apartment without the landlord's approval. So they don't need to approve every person that stays there. Um, you know, I went on many apartment tours and spoke to many landlords, and a lot of them, said no, but you find the few that are okay with it. And one of the landlords I ended up getting 3 apartments with, because he was completely fine with it. And that there is a pro for the landlord as well. That my pitch was, this place. If you rent an apartment for a year, you have no eyes on that property, the inside of it, for a whole year, so you don't know what the guest could be doing to it or your tenant could be doing to it. Where with this business model, it is getting cleaned, pretty consistently after every guest leaves. Um, but like I said, most landlords are a little skittish of Airbnbs. They think of partiers and all the negative connotations of Airbnb. But you find a few that are okay with it, and that's what I did.
What are you finding the types of customers are for those properties? They're in New Haven, Connecticut, is that right?
Yeah, so
Are they
you I picked the
connected
two.
to Yale somehow?
Yeah, I picked the 2 neighborhoods that are kinda like the trendy, cool neighborhoods of New Haven, and they're I'd say 60 to 70% of the travelers are coming, with some association to Yale University, which kind of overshadows that whole city. Um, so it's parents or students are there for like a month or 2 for a summer. Students have a game, or the family is coming, so which I found as a benefit, because most of these people weren't, you know, there for other reasons. Like, it's not a house with 15 people where there's a risk of damage or anything. It's usually people who are there to, be doing something with the school.
What's your occupancy level at properties like this?
I think they hover around 60%. And it's funny, they're pretty seasonal. Like, I thought it would kind of follow the um I was just a little surprised at how even in the summer it's super busy, and then in the winter it kind of dies out. And I thought it would be kind of the opposite, where it would follow the school season. But it's kind of seasonal, just like the rest of, New England.
So you launched this what year?
2021. Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about some of the guests that you've had. I know that people that are in short-term rentals, they can go into Facebook groups and they just read the stories that people like to complain about the guests all the time. I try not to read those things anymore because it
Mhm.
just becomes a downer, and, knock on wood, is not most experience that we have. Um, Tell us about some things you've learned from hosting for these 3 years.
Yeah. Like I said, most of my experiences have been pretty good. I've learned some lessons, like some of these buildings, because it's arbitrage, I couldn't install keypad locks onto some of the doors, which means you have to use the old school key method. Um, Having a one lockbox was not enough, because some people have lost the keys. So I've had some, late Saturday night, a guest is locked out. We have to call a locksmith. Um, but outside of that, I mean, there is one issue where I set up one of the properties, and the first guest that stayed there, smoked cigarettes inside and ruined all the sheets. But that was honestly the worst experience I've had Airbnb. So I've been pretty lucky. And I think it might be, in New Haven, these are on the higher end of the properties in the area. So I know every market kind of has a threshold of nightly rate that if you go below that nightly rate, you're kind of opening it up to guests that, won't respect your property.
Hmm. Rory and I had our second guest ever flood our place. It was partly our fault, though. Remember that?
Yeah, it's before you really get a hold of your systems and everything, that's when you're open to having, these sorts of things happen to a house.
Yeah, the lesson we learned there was do not tell your guests to leave a faucet on a drip if you know that there's a pipe that potentially could freeze or has frozen. Get it taken care of. That was our lesson.
And another thing too is, you can systematize as much as you want, and really, and I feel like I've gotten pretty good at, like, the automated messages and kind of having a process for everything. But it's funny, there's the human aspect of it. Like when someone sends an inquiry and they have all these detailed questions, or the way that they phrase things, I'm like, my spidey senses are going off. I know this guest is going to be issues. And sure enough, there are issues, and then they, want to extend and they want a discount. And it's just, you can't avoid those. I feel like it's maybe like 10% of guests or less you can't avoid that in whatever market you're in.
I think what's pronounced is when you kind of know you're going to have a problem guest coming in, the problems just accelerate and they become larger. And we've had problems with great guests that basically let it brush over them, like not an issue, no big deal. Wait with bated breath for that review. Once you submit yours and it comes in as a 5 star, you're like, oh my God, they gave us a 5 star. Um, but then there's those guests that are gonna be a problem, and sure enough, when something happens to those guests, and Murphy's Law said it will, it just creates such a mental time suck, and everything that you're now focusing on is making sure these people are happy as can be, and they're probably not gonna be happy. We had a guest coming in this summer. We ended up canceling the guest after they arrived, because it just wasn't the right fit, and we had the guest cancel, right? So, we couldn't be the ones that were canceling, but for a variety of reasons after they showed up and a litany of questions, and then there was some other issue that happened within the building, we were able to tell the guests, "Listen, we're gonna give you all your money back, but you need to go call Airbnb and cancel and go find another place." And they ended up doing that. And what I learned is they couldn't even review us. I was thinking they could review, but since they canceled and the review entirely went off, uh, our login or whatever you want to call it, they didn't even have the opportunity to review us. So, we lost the money, but it was just not going to work out with this guest.
Yep. Yeah, sometimes that's for the best. Yeah, I've learned that lesson the hard way, where I've canceled on my end and you get penalized. I haven't done that again since. But um, if they I strongly encourage them to cancel on their end, because I don't want to get penalized by Airbnb.
When you started doing this, you were still working in the media? Is that right?
Yeah.
What'd you do?
Yeah, I worked for Warner Media. I worked in advertising strategy, and then I went into content. I worked for CNN, and kind of bounced around. I had a few other jobs, and then I ended up pivoting into sales and commercial design. Um, Kind of a 180 career switch. But sales was, I was like, I want to get into a career that, has kind of like uncapped income, to kind of use that to kind of put back into real estate or Airbnb. Um, and then very quickly I was like, I reached a point, I quit this summer, where I was like, I I'm mentally elsewhere. I need to just go all in on the Airbnb thing. And it feels like that was years ago at this point.
What's the size of Bella Retreats right now?
Yeah, so I have those 5 arbitrage properties in New Haven, and I have 6 clients across that I co-host for. So across one in Narragansett, Rhode Island, which is a town that I love spending time in, and then a few upstate as well. Upstate New York, remaining ones, yeah, upstate New York.
What are you finding the differences are with guests at the Rhode Island property, the upstate New York property, and the New Haven property? Like, do you have to change your communication style depending on the geography?
Yeah, I don't know if I have to change the communication style. It's more just, that most of the upstate New York travelers are New Yorkers out of the city for the weekend, and are looking for kind of the outdoor experience and, kind of an escape from New York City. So they're, to them, they're in the quote unquote country. Um, and the New Haven properties, it's more kind of people there for something related to the school or, some type of event or something. So it's a little more transactional. Yeah.
We have that also. Boston is kind of we live outside Boston. We used to live in the city, and that's the big metro that drives people to the Lakes region of New Hampshire, up to Maine, or up to Cape Cod or Western Mass. Western Mass is probably a market that your travelers and our travelers share. It's the Berkshires area. Uh, do you Do you have anything that you think that you do a better job with than other people that are doing co-hosting? Like, anything really specific that you pride yourself on saying, I'm really dialed in on this thing, and that's why our guests are super happy, or that's why new hosts, you should work with us.
Yeah. I think I've gotten really good at working with those problem guests. So I over communicate everything. So if there's an issue in the house, like today, one of the properties um, didn't have water and we weren't sure why. So I called the town hall. Turns out that they were um, working on a fire hydrant down the road and letting him know, okay, I'm looking into this. I reached out to the plumber, told him the issue. I've also, I'm calling the town hall right now and just kind of keeping them fully updated. Because I mean, we didn't know that he wasn't going to have, there's not going to be water in the house today. But just over communicating and be really thorough. And this guy specifically has been a problem. He's been with us for a couple weeks in this house. But I think he likes us, and I think he does appreciate my thoroughness and um, staying positive and not, kind of catering to when he gets frustrated, like not also kind of lowering to that vibration or that level.
There's some people that understand it's out of your control, um, but sometimes that still doesn't matter to them because in their mind, like, I could have booked a different place where this wouldn't have happened, right? And those are just frustrating situations because, when we're in a situation like that, like we have some work that's being done by the town next to one of our properties. They're building a beautiful new park, right? But along with that comes a lot of disruption to people that might be next door. And the town was fully aware of that, apologetic, but sometimes that doesn't translate down to a guest who's there for 3 nights because their attitude is they could have stayed somewhere else in town that wasn't next to a construction zone. Um, so sometimes we learn those things along the way. And in that specific situation, we actually had to add language to our listing that explained what was happening next door and the potential for disruption. And we feel like that kind of cleared up any issues we had moving forward beyond one guest that um, was upset that we didn't disclose it, despite the fact that we didn't know it was even happening or that we knew it was going to happen. We just didn't know when it was going to happen. It was kind of out of our control. But
Yeah. Yeah, I'll do have situations like that. After the first night of, and I don't know how common this is, but after the first night a guest stays with us, they'll get an automated message that morning, just checking in, making sure everything's going okay. Like any issues you want to let us know about, happy to address them. And most guests, just kind of thumbs up that message. But I've learned that has really helped get ahead of any larger issues, even if it's a small thing like, hey, this room it was kind of cold last night. Why is that? And like, oh, okay, let me explain how the thermostat works again. Versus, waiting until you get that review and it's a 4-star review, when you could have gotten ahead of that.
You know, one thing from our perspective when we put together these systems and communications, we started off as owners of property. So we were in full control of everything in terms of what TV we chose, what thermostat we chose, what door lock we chose. But when you're co-hosting and representing other owners, you have to kind of work with some of the systems that they give you. How do you coordinate with the owners, and how do you mandate that they use certain technologies? Do they, do you have to compromise and use whatever they have? How do you coordinate with the owners?
Yeah, that's a pretty timely question, and just, as I expand in this business, I'm starting to say no to more potential clients than I expected, and just, there's I'm talking to this owner who has a property upstate. It's a little dated, and I had a pretty frank call where I was like, I think you need to update all the towels, all the bedspreads, um, and I think you should have, this soap brand in all the bathrooms and everything, and they weren't willing to kind of compromise on that. And I don't think I'm gonna move forward with that client, just because to get to the standard that I would like to be at, a place that I would like to stay in myself, that would be a requirement to work with them. Um, yeah, even the issue now, in expansion of the cameras. So now I have like all 6 of my clients there. I think there's 4 different camera brands, and now I'm like, I have to log into each of these apps, and I'm like, okay, moving forward, I'm only working with, Blink, because I like the Blink cameras, but, um, yeah, that's a timely question, just as I'm, starting to make these, more, I guess, just like requirements on my end to work with a client. Um, and I think it's a good thing. It's growing pains, and good to have some kind of standards for the business.
It's all I think we've all been there, and we're going through the exact same thing right now. And again, I've already mentioned it's easy when you're the one that is in charge of making the decisions. And, our background is we have 5 properties that we own in short-term rent and have, been doing this since 2016 and added them on along the way. But the ultimate arbiter is us, right? Like, I want to put that in there, I go do it. When you're working with other people, and we do have co-hosted clients just like you do now, and we definitely have some clients that are a little obstinate with what we would recommend. When you're building your business, you're trying to just take clients wherever you can find them, right? Like we're literally we're in the same position right now. A lot of people that are building co-hosting businesses that are a couple more years down the way, they give the advice that you're now heeding, which is make sure it fits within your systems and don't be afraid to say no. And I have to keep saying that also in my head. We did say no to something recently as well. And we're about to say no to something else, which I won't get into just yet because I still have to think it through. But I'm trying to figure out how to say no, because it's not the easiest thing when somebody wants to work with you and they throw all these conditions your way. What's the courteous way of just saying, "Okay, listen, this isn't the right fit." It's probably just that, right?
Yeah. No, I'm a big believer in, if you say no to the something that doesn't work for you, eventually, the something that does work for you will come your way. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, I mean, it's, these clients, you will have to interact with them a lot. So the number one requirement for me is just someone that I think is, respects my opinion and is easy to work with. Even if the property is beautiful, but this owner is, you know, already, there's some red flags on how they interact with you. That for me might be a deal breaker.
Let's talk a bit about the technology because you alluded a little bit to it and you mentioned that some of your properties don't have a smart lock that you could put on it. Smart locks are a pretty standard thing these days. In short-term rentals, all of our properties have actually, this is not true. That's not a statement. I was gonna say all of our properties have the same one except for a handful, but they don't because we're in a situation with one of our properties that we own that we have to use a smart key box because of the type of door that we have. Uh, but what are you using for technology in your properties? Like for those ones that you have to use a hard key, are you using smart key boxes or are you not allowed to attach those to door frames?
No, yeah, I need to get uh that is a good question. For those arbitrage properties, a lot of these are, older buildings in New Haven, and they have these older locks that you can't put the smart lock onto, or older door handles. So I just have a lockbox, I have a backup lockbox, and I have a hidden one, which feels a little archaic, and I would like to kind of update that system. But for any of my co-hosting clients, my requirement has been a keypad entry. Um, but yeah, all the properties, like I require having a camera outside of each of the properties just to kind of have eyes, on the outside. For other technology, Turno is a big thing that I use for all my cleaners. And then Hospitable is my property management software.
We too use Hospitable. I learned that you can integrate multiple brands of smart locks into Hospitable, which is a good thing. I didn't know that you could do that, but we usually get codes everywhere. But now we have one client that has a Yale Assure, which I was able to get logged in there. I have another client with an August lock. The problem with that is the client refuses a keypad because he basically it's tacky. So yeah, uh, it's okay. We're working through some things with that client, but um, we have another property actually that we own that we have a smart key box by Igloo Home. You might want to look into this one. And Rory actually found this brand, right? He had it at your office too.
Right, because that door, the commercial door, wasn't compatible with any sort of smart lock that was on the market, so we had to resort to a smart key box.
So it's a Igloo Home is a smart key box, and then there's actually a bridge that you could buy separately. It's $75, and the reviews of the bridge are a little fickle. But I just hooked one of them up at one of our properties, and knock wood, it's actually working really well. So the bridge basically talks to the your Wi-Fi network, and then through Bluetooth communicates with the smart key box. So now you could actually vary codes with the smart key box, and we did that for the very first time for property we've owned for 2 years and didn't know about this because a friend of mine mentioned that there was a bridge with the smart key box. And I was like, you're kidding me. How did I not know this? So look into that. It actually might help. Yeah. Uh, but trying out Turno, I haven't really gone down that road just yet because we have some systems with the cleaners that, are, the cleaners that we've had for quite some time, and what we're doing seems to work out well. We use Hospitable for our property management software as well. We use Google Home whenever possible, throughout the houses. So we're using the Wi-Fi. What is it? The mesh Wi-Fi system, which seems to distribute the Wi-Fi pretty well. Are you using StayFi anywhere?
I am not. That's on my to-do list of things I do want to start implementing. Yeah.
I've had a up and down relationship with StayFi. It's now kind of on the upswing because I think I've worked out a couple of the kinks with their network interfering with other networks. And I was able to get a smart lock on a StayFi internet access point that I was not able to get using the typical Xfinity router. So I had another smart lock that I installed on a property that could not communicate with the network with strength. So I wasn't able to vary codes, but then I decided to install one of the StayFi access points there. And it seems like it's actually now online, which is a great win if I'm able to get that win going. And now it's getting me thinking a little bit more about actually putting the StayPi devices in all these properties that we're co-hosting so we can start building up that database that we probably should be building and have been building all along.
Definitely. Yeah, that's on the kind of the horizon for this coming year is just kind of, building out, some email campaigns and starting to retarget those guests that have stayed with us. And, I've done it kind of ad hoc, but I would love to kind of build out a more systematized approach. And I feel like that those email addresses and those contacts like that only grows over time, and there is a lot of value in having a large email database to retarget for future stays.
Now you're living in New York City, so you're in Brooklyn. And you, as you mentioned earlier, you partnered up with Andrew on a short-term rental meetup in New York. And I think you hosted an event already, right?
Yep. Yeah, we had a first event. Yeah, we had a great turnout. It was uh, the first one, so this is kind of new for us, and wanted to have a good mix. I've been to many networking events in, my W-2 career, and I wanted to be careful to not to have some actual networking, but also make it a little bit informational. So people do want to come back if this is going to be a monthly event. y- I think people would start to drop off if it's only networking. You're seeing the same people every month. So, we're starting to build out like our kind of topics for each event, and I think we'll talk for maybe 15 to 20 minutes, and then have the rest of it be a little more casual networking.
What is the objective of doing something like that? Like, we've done networking groups, we've been to a lot of networking things, but, hosting one in New York City, it seems like, I don't know, New York is just it's the biggest market in the United States, right? There's just millions of people in the metro area. For some reason, it doesn't seem like the type of market that people would be into, the short-term rental world. But you've kind of proven that otherwise with at least your first event.
Yeah, it's funny. As I leaned into this world of Airbnb while living in New York, I was like, I would love to, I see the power of the network through our mastermind and other connections I've made where I was like, I would love to build that base here as well. And there's not, these groups do not exist. And if they did, I find like a meetup page that, they haven't had an event in 3 years. And I was like, this is odd to me. Um, and I think the biggest thing is, the regulations in New York make Airbnb, as after they passed, about a year ago, I think it's become pretty hard to Airbnb host here. However, I think there are still, and I think we're proving that there's a lot of people who live in New York City but invest elsewhere or manage elsewhere, which is what I do. I live here, but I manage all outside of the greater city limits. Um, and yeah, I think there's still a lot of interest in it. And if it's not in hosting itself, it's a related industry, whether it's um, real like loans or real estate agents or other property managers as well.
How often are you leaving the city and visiting your markets?
Uh, right now, it's a couple times a month. Yeah, and these are usually for new properties that I'm touring or maybe setting up one or making some changes. But once they're live, I don't have to go as much. I try to do periodic, end of the season, but um, those New Haven properties I haven't been to in 6 to 10 months. They work pretty well. And the biggest thing is I with having the cameras on the outside of the property and then also turnout and being super communicative with my main cleaner, I know what the properties look like on the inside because I get photos and videos, multiple times a month. And that I feel like I have a pretty good sense of the status of those places.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, it's the temptation of hopping in the car and going all the time, and I certainly do that more than I claim to do. But I don't do it with every single instance of something that has to get solved. I'm also trying to build out a ground team of cleaners and handymen and people that could pick stuff up. And the one thing that I still can't get past is sometimes it's just as easy for me to do it, so I just do it. Um, but we're also a little closer to some of our properties. I mean, even the drive from Brooklyn to New Haven, you have to go through Westchester and then up 95. It's still a 2-hour drive, isn't it?
Yep. Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
and I am happy that that is true because it has forced me to build out good systems and build a team that I trust in that market. Because I've been managing this business remotely from the beginning. So I could never, just stop in to re- do supply replenishment or the small things that I know some other people I beg them to stop doing because it's not worth my time.
So what are doing with supply your plan?
So I use Amazon Prime, and we just deliver the packages a day before the cleaner comes, and that system has worked pretty well for us.
You deliver them to the house itself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Every house is a little bit different from what I've learned. I mean, sometimes packages don't make it to the actual doorstep. Uh, so, if you're listening to this and trying to build out a system, it's almost a block by block thing, right? Like we have property up at the lake in New Hampshire where I know that if FedEx or UPS or Amazon delivers, it'll go to the house. But if the United States Postal Service delivers, it might get locked up inside our mail house, which I don't think I have a key for, or I do, and I don't know where it is. So I have to be careful of how things are delivered to properties like that. Another property that we're starting to onboard a province down, I just spoke with the owner yesterday and I asked about supplies. It's a legitimate question. And he said that sometimes the supplies don't end up at their doorstep, but they end up at a different doorstep in the same complex. So if we choose to do that, we have to be aware that that's the process. Uh, I wish it was simple, but I think every single address is a little bit different.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if that process didn't work, I think it would be kind of, using a cleaner a little more and maybe pay her for every delivery. If I, deliver a lot of boxes to her house that she has to spread across a few properties, maybe I pay her extra for that service.
Rory, we're going to start to wrap it up. Any final question for Jared?
No, just what comes next for Stellar Retreats next year? What's your path of growth?
Yeah, so my goal is to have 15 clients by the end of this year, which is a little aggressive goal. I'm talking to a few larger ones with a few properties, so I do possible to get to that number. And then next year it's expansion continuing. So I have one full-time virtual assistant. I would like to get another one, and also I do need help with sales. I would like to have someone, I'm calling on those markets that I mentioned and maybe getting a salesperson that's, a hungry person who's maybe looking at some other markets that we can expand into. Um, but past that, I mean, I do see this kind of as a path for me to kind of pivot into other forms of entrepreneurship. I'm a big Cody Sanchez fan, and I like the kind of small business model, and I would love to pivot into maybe storage containers, maybe car washes or laundromats, those kind of simple businesses. Um, and I would love to also start a coffee chain. That's a fun one that I yeah, living in New York, I don't know if we need another coffee shop, but it is something I really like myself, and I would like to start a business like that.
Seems to be the romantic dream of what a lot of people perceive people in Brooklyn to want to do.
Yep, yep, pretty spot on.
All right, last question. What's one thing that you wish you knew when you started?
Ooh, um, one thing I wish I knew. It's not as hard as it looks. It's not as hard as it seems. I mean, I've I definitely was in the analysis paralysis phase for a while, listening to Bigger Pockets for years until I made the jump into that first arbitrage. And, every step along the way, you kind of hit a wall and it feels like you can't get past that. And then, just through trial and error and making mistakes, I can get to the next level and get first client and then the second client and, continue to expand. Um, and yeah, that's probably the one thing.
Well, that is a great attitude, and we'll close it off on that. Jarrett, we're gonna put all your links in the show notes. We'll put a link to Stellar Retreats, your social media. How can people get a hold of you? Your LinkedIn, Instagram bag.
This thing, Stellar Retreat.
All right, we'll link that up there. And Rory, you're over at rorygill.com for more information about the work that you're doing in the short-term rental space, right?
That's the easiest spot to find me. Yes.
All right. And if you want to be a guest on this podcast or you want to listen to other episodes, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or you can go to smartstayshow.com and fill out a form and let us know who you are. And if you want to be on the show, we'll get back to you. Thank you so much, Jarrett. Best of luck to everything you're doing with Stellar Retreats. We're rooting for you, and we know you'll get to those goals. Thank you for sharing all that insight about technology and guests and how you're growing your business. Really appreciate that.
Thank you both.
Thank you.